Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the second part of the Coalition Leadership How-To series with our lovely trainer, Molly O'Neill. We're so excited to have everyone, and we thank you for returning for the second part, or if you are new to this, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and we hope that you can learn something today and network, meet some other people in the coalition world, and also just learn something new from Molly. I'll go ahead and introduce myself and Prevention Action Alliance. So my name is Hannah Cox, and I am the Events and Education Coordinator here at PAA. So I do all things webinars, all things events, and online trainings, in-person trainings. So I'm just here to support our staff. Prevention Action Alliance is a statewide nonprofit here in Central Ohio, and we just aim to provide all Ohioans with opportunities for prevention, education, resources, advocacy, and everything like that. So yeah, we also have our Ohio Coalition Institute, which Amy and our other prevention coordinator, Fran Varga, they run. And so I'll make sure to drop the links to everything like that in the chat. But yes, let me go to the next slide. So next Wednesday at this time will be the last session for this training series. So we hope you can join us for that as well. But if not, we are posting these recordings on our website after we go live. I think we're linking it to YouTube. So if you ever want to go back, or if you missed last week's or can't make next week's, we highly encourage you to watch those and use all of our resources that we have on our website. But I think, yes, we'll get to that at the end. I think for now, I'll hand it over to Molly. She can share her screen and get started on her introduction.
Good morning. It looks like, well, no, there's a Michael. So I was going to say good morning, ladies, but good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really happy to see you all again. Appreciate and I think I know a few of you at least were on last time with us last week. So thanks for coming back. You're brave and hardy. I I am coming to you live this morning from Sandusky, Ohio, where I've been attending and presenting at the National Alliance for Recovery Residences this week, and it's been a great time to connect and get recharged by all of our people. So I hope that you all get to go to some academy or the training or something that gets you recharged again soon, because that's always so important. This morning, I would like to start with asking you all to just throw your name in the chat, and alongside that name, just one quick little thing that you're hoping to gain from the training this morning. And then we can maybe share some of that. If we keep our numbers a little bit smaller this morning, then we can probably share some of that pretty soon. So, whoops, I always do that. As Hannah said, I'm Molly O'Neill. I'm the CEO of Ohio Citizen Advocates for Addiction Recovery. I am a woman in long-term recovery. I am someone who has worked in this field for a long time, and I've had the privilege to run organizations that were the whole continuum, and the prevention folks are always the most fun. Let me just say that. So here's our agenda for today. Whoops. We are going to talk this week a little bit more about the governance and leadership of a coalition, and we're going to move sort of into the maturing board or steering committee phase. We're going to talk about turnover and the ongoing recruiting needs of a board, and the growing pains of transitioning into a more governance-oriented steering committee, and how, as a staff person, you can support and help manage your board, and the board chair in managing the board. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to assess the board and how you might want to set goals and strategies, not just for the board, but for the organization. So I think what Hannah did for me was to create a poll, and for some reason I closed it on my screen. So we're going to ask all of you to just say where you're from in the poll, so that I can get a little bit of an idea what areas we're hailing from today. And I'm not seeing it. Hannah, how do I bring that back up? Oh, here we go. I bet that's
Okay, you found it.
Yeah.
Looks like
so there we go. I think we've got everybody, right?
yes.
Okay. Well, that's funny. Well, it's not letting me share the actual answers. It's just.
I have the results. I was able to open them up on a web page.
Oh, great.
Looks like we have Lima, Circleville, Wing Support and Recovery, another Circleville, Huron County, Huron, and then Mahoning County.
All right.
I think that's all in Ohio.
All right. Well, yeah, that is all in Ohio. We had some visitors from other states last week. That was fun too. Okay, so I asked you to put sort of the one thing that you want to take away from the session today into the chat. So we're just going to kind of move on, but I am hoping that we can meet your needs today. So what does a maturing coalition or board steering committee look like? It really does look like a team. It looks like a group who are connected and working together, and who are accomplished in their leadership roles. And the organization itself, with a good, strong, mature leadership group, is able to function more autonomously. Oddly enough, that seems ironic, but as long as your board or steering committee is functioning well in their role, then the team that are working inside the organization can function better in their role as well. So this is a slide that I keep in here because I want you to have it. You'll get the PowerPoint materials, right, Hannah? But it's a lot of words, and I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I just want to show you that there's a lot of steps and a lot of characteristics that you can help yourselves kind of take a look at and see where you're at as a group. One of the most important pieces is the very first thing, which is the coalition's leaders are focused on the big picture. They're focused on the fiscal health of the organization. They're focused on the overall policies of the organization that are leading to the positive and healthy culture of the coalition and the positive impact that the coalition is making. So they are also folks who lead by example. So they're now following their job description, and they're actually really taking seriously their roles and working as a well-oiled machine, I would say, in terms of everybody's engaged, and everyone is doing their part so that the whole machine can move forward. In a younger and less mature coalition, the leadership is often they don't really know yet solidly what they are supposed to be doing, and so people kind of slip and slide into each other's lane, and that can be a challenge. It can even create some conflicts that need to be worked through. One of the things that I learned early on in my career from my first board as a young executive director, they were all women, and they were all founders of this organization that I was starting work for. And I had such enormous respect for them because they hashed everything out. They didn't, they were respectful, and they were kind, but they were direct and clear in their conversations so that they could really discuss and work through any kinds of conflicts, and also just really vet their decisions, right? So if you can't find a way to be in conflict or be in I think conflict's probably too strong a word in some ways, but if you can't manage to do that, then you have to work on that, and then you can work on how to make really good decisions for the organization. So that is a sort of a characteristic of a mature board, is that they're able to work through things together. They're also they're evaluating themselves, and they're evaluating the executive director or CEO of the coalition, and they are led by the strategic plan. They lead a strategic planning process, and then that strategic planning or plan is actually something that they put into place. So it's not just a dust collector; it's something that gets revisited on a regular basis to be able to make sure that we're achieving, goals, that the strategies are working, and that the coalition's work is really coming to fruition. So there are there's a great lot of work for a steering committee or a leadership group for a coalition that doesn't have anything to do with doing the hands-on prevention work of the coalition, and is more about providing a culture and the resources and goals and direction, overall direction for that coalition, so that the coalition can complete their activities. And the board is evaluating the organization's outcomes and making sure they're staying on top of that on a regular basis. So, an executive will give a report on a regular basis about the outcomes of the organization, not just the activities. So that's really an important piece as well for a coalition leadership or steering committee to be asking those for that information, and for the chair of that committee to be working together with the paid staff executive to make sure that that's a part of the information sharing and communication. So moving from a working coalition leadership or a working steering committee where we all rolled up our sleeves and we got this thing going, transitioning into a more governance oriented or a more strategic oriented group is sometimes fraught. Occasionally it comes with challenges because we don't always have the exact folks in those roles anymore. But what we're focusing on now, and what, of course, the responsibilities of a prevention coalition steering committee or governing board, is to really set strategy and mission, to be the governing authority. And this is kind of assuming that the coalition has moved its way into becoming a 501c3, but that's not required for these activities to still be really helpful and important. It's important for the board or steering committee to be transparent and accountable. They're accountable to each other. They're accountable to the staff and the goals and measures of the organization, but they're also accountable to the community. And that's probably the most important group of folks that really need for the coalition leadership to be transparent. Of course, there are compliance and risk management challenges that boards are responsible to deal with and manage, and the financial management or the fiscal health of the organization is heavily on the steering committee or coalition leadership's shoulders. So there are multiple, these are just four. There's multiple models for governing, and these are four different kinds of leadership or board of director, if you will, models. And typically, the coalition, by its very nature, is a more cooperative and community engagement model. Some aspects of both of those will come into play. The officers, if you are a 501c3 and you are working to really govern, and your mature prevention coalition is going to be working on really having the right people in the right roles. So, as you're recruiting new board members, you're going to think about what are the roles that we need to make sure that we have covered. And, board chair role is critical, and board treasurer role is critical. So if as a leadership group, you really need to when we're a working board and we're just getting started, it's really who will do it. But as a mature board, we're really looking for skill sets, and we're looking for folks who have the talent and the time to put into a particular role on the board, and the officer roles become a little bit more important in that kind of a setting. So as you are looking at who you want to bring on board, the financial skills are important, the leadership skills are important, but we also, there are so many things that people can bring to the table. Communications, having experience in communications and marketing can be a really important role, particularly for a coalition, as a coalition is so much more engaged with community and hoping and working toward engaging community, those skills can be critical. And it's also one of the things that I really want to make sure I say is that a more mature board has folks on it, or a more mature leadership of coalition leadership and steering committee have folks involved and participating and on it who have been on leadership, in leadership before, who have been on boards or coalition steering committees, or in some way have experience with participating in effective governance and effective leadership of an organization, of a nonprofit, hopefully. I'm wondering if anybody has any questions so far. And if you want to, I also want to remind folks, if you want to, I'm very open to questions as we go, but I also you're welcome to throw questions in the chat. And I know that Hannah will help me keep track of that as well.
Molly, I have a question. It has to do with your previous slide, and it talked about when the board does evaluations of themselves.
Yes.
How is that done? What type of platform, or, we've never had it. I feel very good when you had that flow chart that I get there. I think I counted 13 boxes or so that we probably are good for about like 7 of them or so. And so, but when it comes to like evaluating themselves, yes, the board is evaluated annually at the very bottom. Who does that? How's it done?
There's some really good tools out there. And there are some that are just fairly simple to use as well. My favorite tool really is a tool that I can share. I can give it to Hannah, and she can share it out if you want. It's just a very simple self-assessment that asks the board members to answer a question that is about the board as a whole, and then also about them individually. So that they think about how they're connecting, what they're doing, how they're participating, and then they also think about how is the board functioning as a group. And so they fill out those surveys, and they all go then to the board chair, and the board chair and the executive can collate those, and then report out and have conversation and discussion. And that is that's really very simple but very helpful way of maintaining insight. It's hard to have insight about how you're functioning, and so having a way to pull it all together is very, very helpful. There's a and I'm trying to remember the exact name of it, but there's a tool that I really like. It's a great tool to maybe use every couple of years, because it's a lot more intensive in answering questions, but it gives the board a way of discussing how the organization is functioning in multiple areas, like how, multiple questions about the fiscal health of the organization, about the program health of the organization, about do we have partnerships? Are we connecting, et cetera? And so then you have different domains within which you are seeing the sort of the grading of the whole organization, and board leadership is one component of that. But it also, from my perspective, and I've always thought that the board and the executive and the staff to some extent, but the board really get to see how well they're doing by seeing how well the organization is functioning. And I will get the name of that. It's a tool that was developed out of Colorado several years ago, and we've used it and it's just, it's really helpful. And if you wanted to, you can either just use the tool, or you can have the folks who developed it really work with you on it, and they will provide analysis, which is it's a good investment. I hope that was helpful, Susan, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well.
Molly, sorry to interrupt. There also is a question in the chat from Allison. She asked, is there a specific number of board members that a coalition should have? We're developing our governing board now.
Yeah, that's that's sort of the $65,000 question. I have a personal sort of bias. I really like the numbers 9 and 11, not because I like the numbers, but because I like that amount of folks around the table. I have had mentors in the past who have said they really feel like 7 is a great number because it's more manageable. And the truth is, and this is true, you're going to have folks on your board who are harder to get to really engage. And so if you have 7 folks on your board and you're playing kind of a numbers game, then you might sort of run at having 4 or 5 of those folks really engaged. And there's a lot of strategies and ways to continue to engage folks, and that's part of what we're going to talk about. But I think an odd number is helpful for voting, of course, and then but I think 11 is good because there's if you get into a nice committee structure, you want to have your leadership of those committees. You want to have enough folks to actually do work on those committees. And you don't want to have all of your committees full of all the same people. So I think 11 is a pretty good number. Boards that get unwieldy, like, 19 and up into the 20s is those folks that is really an ambassador board or a advisory board number. So if you're starting to see that that coming up or cropping in, then you might consider creating an advisory board or an auxiliary board. So, and recruiting, of course, is an ongoing process. And we did talk last time about recruiting quite a bit. So, but really a mature board, I mean, at first when you're just getting started, you're talking to everybody and you're saying, come join us. But a mature board has a process that is in place and steps that everyone is adhering to. And you could have an application, you could have certainly would want to require a bio or a CV. And you really want to be able to say when you are recruiting, what it is that you're recruiting for. Not, and I don't mean that in terms of you need to be able to say your mission and talk about the coalition, because those are the obvious things. What you want to know is what role in the organization of the board you are filling. So there's a board matrix that is very helpful to kind of identify where the gaps are. And on a regular basis, an annual basis, your board or steering committee should be filling out this matrix, and you really get a great clear idea from that what's missing. It asks questions like, well, of course, all of the basic demographics, but it's also, it also asks things that are a little bit more personal if people want to answer their identity questions, their orientation questions. their recovery questions, lived experience questions. And then there are also, obviously there's skill sets in your real life, in your work life, let me say that. You actually may be an accountant in your work life, but that's not what you want to do in this organization, because that's what you do all day long. And so that would be information to get when you're talking to someone about potential or prospective board membership. And that accountant may have, it may also have this amazing music proficiency, and they really love, teaching, and they really love connecting, and they do events, and et cetera, et cetera. And so that might be a skill set that would be awesome to have as a leader in your organization. But so you have to really sort of sort through what people's needs are for joining a leadership or a steering committee, along with what your needs are for that person. And I do have in here, I think, yeah. I do want to say before I move on from this slide that having an orientation process is also very important. So your process for identifying board members, you want all of your board members to feel good about being able to bring names to the table. So you're asking them to bring up folks that they think could fill needs and roles on your board. They bring those to the table and you talk about them as a group. And then you ask for volunteers from the group or the committee to interview that person. The person who brings their name to the table can certainly be one of those people, but there should be at least one other person who doesn't know that person yet, to come to that and be able to see and hear and make make an impression, get an impression of this person. So meeting with the candidate and using a standard set of interview questions is really helpful. In the beginning, the interview questions are things like, would you have time? Or do you have any interest in? But when you're a more mature entity and you're really looking for a governing body, then you're going to ask things that are more specific to that. And I'll get to those in a minute. But the orientation process is really important, because that's how you engage people, and that's how you get them started in your system. And that sets the stage for how they're going to function as a member of your leadership. So I feel like it's really important, and it's been very successful for me over the years, that to have a board member, a new board member, connected with a mentor board member for their first year. A mentor board member can and should do things like reach out in between board meetings and ask the new board member if they have any questions or if they're confused about anything. Make sure that they can reach out and make sure that the new board member has got all the materials that they should have gotten from the staff. Then the new board member can also hopefully be made to feel comfortable in reaching out and asking questions. And that can help them interact in the steering committee meetings or or other committee meetings in a much more effective way. Because it's not easy to be a new board member. I had a conversation last night. In fact, one of the folks had been invited and joined an Adam H board in their area, and they were really concerned about the decisions that were being made, and they didn't really feel good about or comfortable asking those in the meetings. And so it would be great for them if they had a member mentor that they could reach out to. So here's here's just kind of an example. If you of a selection process, I think it is important to determine up front what your needs are and your priorities and gaps, and then to set some goals. Maybe you say, can everyone please bring 3 potential new board members to the meeting next week, and be prepared to share, about them. And then if you have a large enough group and you're mature enough and well established enough, it's great to have a committee that's actually running the process of board recruiting. And so you have a chairperson for that committee who has overall responsibility to manage and organize the process, and provide some oversight to the process, because it's so hard. It's just hard. You think that we all have kind of this sense that we're begging people to come on board with us, but the reality is this is a really important work, and you're offering someone an opportunity to be part of a very important group of people doing really important things. So it's a compliment if you are going to ask someone if they want to be part of your board of directors or your steering committee. And that is the mindset that is most important to have when you're engaging in this process. Not that you want to be, elitist, or, come across in any kind of arrogant way, but that you really take this seriously, and the importance of it is has weight and depth and gravity. And so it's not just anybody that can be invited to be on this board. So have your talking points. Make sure that the person, here's one way I really like to share with people, a way that I think is important to connect initially. And that is to say to someone, would you be interested in being considered for this steering committee? Because if you would be, then there's a process I would love to engage you in. And it's kind of, and I like to use a little bit of humor along with trying to communicate the gravity. But it is kind of like a dating process. And if both parties get to know one another, and then they can make a decision. It's not all about them deciding whether they would be willing to be part of you. It goes both ways. And then you establish a follow-up procedure. So who's going to talk, who's going to talk to them, who's going to make the call. Then you establish the follow-up. What happens if the board decides they don't want to invite this person? Who has to make that phone call? And so I think typically it's the board chair or the committee chair who will call the person and either extend the invitation or thank them for their time, and ask them if they would be, willing to maybe join a committee, or become a volunteer, or that the board really loves their this or their that, and would they be willing to serve in another way? And if they don't want to, then of course you graciously understand that, and will keep them in the loop. So it can be hard, but it is really important, because what you're doing is so critically important. But everybody, and primarily what I want to make sure that I communicate, which is that although each individual has their own style of communication, you have consistent messaging across. People are using the same kind of language. People are sharing the same information. These are the gaps we have on our board, and right now we're not looking for somebody who who has musical talent, we really do need that accounting. And we totally respect that you don't want to do that because that's your day job. And we appreciate your willingness to be considered, you know, those kinds of things. But you also want to establish the talking points specifically about the coalition. So what are your coalition, what is your coalition focused on? What are they, what are the goals? What are they working toward accomplishing? And make sure that you have that information clear, and that and consistently everybody's on the same page about that, so that any of the folks that you're attempting to recruit can get a really good idea of what they're going to be asked to do, which leads me to making sure that you have a one sheet for someone that tells them what are the, when are the board meetings, how long do they take, what are the committee assignment requirements, how much time a month is the expectation, of them, is there a gift expectation of them, which there always should be, particularly for a 501c3, but any coalition, this is not free typically. Even though we have a lot of volunteers, we also need to have financial resources, and everybody needs to be making an investment. So my recommendation is, if you are developing a new board or coalition leadership steering committee, that be clear from the onset. Everybody needs to know up front. And I know the tendency is to be afraid that you might put someone off and then they wouldn't want to be involved. And if that's the case, then it is important that you know that right now too. So, a person has to be able and willing to step up. And by able, I don't mean they have to have really deep pockets, although some of those folks are great to have. I mean that they have the willingness to not have that latte every week and instead donate that $250 or something a year to the organization, or $20 to the organization. Anything is, you can set that if you want to, but it typically, it's a gift that is meaningful to that person, is sort of the language that we use. And then that, finally, that vote, you come back to you've had your conversation with folks, and the people assigned to do that come back and report out, and you hopefully have an application that you can look at, and you are able to make a decision. And don't take too long then to call the person. So this is another one of those slides. Oops, what happened here? That I really just want you to have all of this information. These are some good interview questions. I wouldn't necessarily expect anyone to get all of these questions into one interview, but some things like learning what their knowledge is about board membership. What do you think the characteristics of a great board member are? And then learning about what their motivations are. So learning about what they think the primary board roles are. I think those are all really good questions, so that you can not necessarily, if they don't know the answers, you're not necessarily going to not ask them to be on the board, but then what they're bringing in and what they are not bringing in, so that you can gauge your mentor appropriately, and you can gauge some training and support for the new board member appropriately. If you've got somebody who's coming on who's got great experience, then you can assign a mentor to them that is going to focus more on helping them understand your coalition your goals and your needs. If you've got an inexperienced person coming on, then that board mentor needs to be somebody who helps them understand how to function as a board member along the way. So these are questions that I think will really help you get a feel for the person in your conversation. And again, you'll have these slides. Engagement, retention of board is really, it's really a very, very important activity of your, not just your executive, but your board has to really function as the retainers of their membership. The steering committee needs to keep folks engaged. They need to have really good, clear roles and responsibilities defined for each one of the members and their committees. If you create a committee, and we'll talk a little bit about committees further on, when you create a committee, you should have a charter for that committee. Those members should be very clear about what their responsibilities are and what their goals are. And those should all be written out so that there's no guessing and there's no confusion. And effective communication, open and transparent. We don't have, the thing that is a killer of any steering committee or any board is if you have members of that board having another meeting out in the parking lot after the board meeting, and it happens all the time. So it's just critically important that you set a really clear and open culture on the board where people are not being judged for asking questions. They're not being criticized for making comments. They're respected for their opinions. And that, as I kind of started with earlier, people don't agree with each other, and that's fine. And that's important, in fact, because if everybody just agrees with everything that the board chair or the board, the executive staff members say, then you're not going to function well. You won't have the kind of mature guidance that the organization really needs. You have to be able to vet all of the work that you're doing from all sides, and you'll hear more about that from when we talk a little bit about the legal duties of a board of directors as well. But that communication piece and transparency are huge elements of creating a healthy culture. And conflict management, it's a good idea to have kind of upfront a process, a procedure for addressing conflicts that are arising. And because they're going to, we are human beings. And even though we disagree with one another, there are ground rules, right? We're civil, we're kind, we're open and honest. And it is important that that the chair and the more the folks with more longevity on the board are able to model those things to the new board members as well. But if there's a conflict, and I'm in my second year, so I don't have my mentor anymore, and I want to know, how do I deal with this? Because this person is just really bugging me, the way they, their attitude, the way they, talk over me all the time, the way they, don't seem to listen to other people, whatever it is that I might be irritated by. How do I deal with that? Well, first of all, of course, as healthy folks, we will will suggest that that person go to the other person and have a conversation and see if they can't work that out for them with each other, and maybe have a conversation with that person as the chair of the board. Have a conversation with that person about being able to really be direct and clear about your needs and your expectations. And oftentimes, as a executive director or CEO, I very often had board members come to me with their conflicts or challenges, or the issues that they felt they had on or among the board members. And that will happen. And of course, then the executive needs to connect. I mean, if it's a simple little thing and the executive has a way of helping them manage that quickly and easily, then you don't want to blow it out of proportion. But typically, an executive needs to pull the chair in and have a conversation, and then the chair and the board person can work together to create a strategy for resolving the challenge. The board chair and the board itself the board is the entity. The executive works for the board. And very often, especially in newer organizations, or well, let me retrace my steps, especially in organizations where you have a founding leader who is the executive, that person becomes the organization. And that's problematic. You've got to let the organization be the organization, and members of the steering committee work for the organization. They don't work for the executive, and the executive works for the steering committee and the organization. And that's important to kind of keep clarity around in your mind. We have any questions? Okay. So the board evaluation, again, that is a process that needs to happen on a regular basis. Maybe it's annually, and maybe it's every 18 months, or but don't leave it too long. Make sure that you're keeping the feedback in front of yourselves often enough that you can make adjustments before it's too late if there are issues. So management of your coalition board of directors or your steering committee also includes things like really having a sense of humor and being able to be positive in the face of challenges. We have a very serious life and death kind of issue that we work on together as people in prevention and treatment and recovery. And sometimes it gets just very heavy. And so we have to work together to keep our vision forward, to keep our sense of humor, our positive attitude. And it's important to have inspiration and keep the eye on the prize, right? Keep your goal in the forefront. So you have this mature board who are functioning well, who are filling their roles, who actually take seriously their job descriptions, and it's time to govern, and that's what you're doing. You're setting policy, you're supporting the executive and the staff with a strategic plan. You are fiscally responsible, and you have these really core board member duties that you're taking seriously. And the duty of care, of course, is that the board member needs to be serious about really doing their work. Not serious in that you can't have fun doing it because you need to, but really taking their responsibility to care for the organization seriously. And it means proactive participation and communication, and really knowing why you're there. the duty of loyalty. All of the activities need to be in the best interest of the organization. And this is what I think about when I think about how the board, the executive and board relationships can get a little wonky, because it is really important that the board remember that they are there for the organization. And even that really charismatic, that really passionate and smart board executive is there. They are not the one that the board is working to they're not there as the person that the board wants to take care of. The board supports the executive, the board fulfills those roles, but the board is there on behalf of the organization, period. And the board is the leader of the organization. And so all of the work that any individual board member does should be in the best interest of the organization, and not not just in the best interest of the executive, and certainly not in the best interest, focusing on the best interest of the individual board member. So when you're interviewing somebody, say they're I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but say they're an insurance agent and they're really getting started and they're trying to connect with people and so that they can get more business. And that would be, you kind of pick up on that as the reason that they want to become part of this board. And that might be a caution, because that's probably not why you want them to come on your board. I mean, it's certainly a reason why people join boards, because they want to connect and network, but it can't be the primary reason, and they certainly can't benefit financially or otherwise from their board membership. So those conflicts of interest and that conflict statement become really important. And then there's the duty of obedience, which is kind of one of those words that I think can be misconstrued, but not in this setting, because it's pretty clear. As a board member, it is incumbent upon you to follow the organizational rules and to follow the bylaws, make sure that your bylaws are always up to date, and that you are acting in accordance with the bylaws. So, and then the other piece of that is that you need to act in accordance with the laws of the land. So you certainly need to not be breaking the law in community, and then acting as an ambassador for the coalition. That would be a big problem. Any questions or comments? Okay. These are the things, these are the responsibilities that of a board of directors. Again, this list in this way is coming to you because we don't have a whole lot of time in this training, but I want you to have this list. There's a few things on here. Well, everything on here is important. So I shouldn't say there's a few things on here that are more important, but selecting the executive and annually providing a review of the executive and their functioning is very important. And typically the executive committee will work together as a committee, and that would be a committee of the officers of the organization. That executive committee would work together to use a tool and review and provide feedback to the executive. The executive committee will report out on what their review of the executive is to the full board. And then if there are changes that need to be made, then of course the full board will vote on those changes. And those could be that there's a change in the employment contract. The executive may be really functioning at their highest, and so they are asking for a raise, or they're asking for a car allowance, or they're asking, some other benefit. And so that is certainly not out of order, but it is something that the full board would need to vote on, and that contract would need to be ratified. But one of the things that I think a 501c3 board of directors is critically important, that they understand that they are responsible for the fiscal health of the organization. So if they're not helping with fundraising, if they're not helping to make sure that the financials are being managed properly, then that can come back, come back on the board of directors with a vengeance. So that proper financial oversight is truly critical. And what that also requires, if you are a board chair or an executive, that also requires providing training to the full board on how to read a financial statement, and what questions to ask, and how to understand what you're hearing from a financial perspective. It is not everybody's bailiwick, right? Not everybody really, in fact, more often than not, I've had my board members say, I don't really understand this and I don't really want to. I mean, that's just a human thing. But as an executive and as a board member on other boards, I can't let that person off the hook. I have to provide them with the training and the information that they need to be able to do their job as a board member and provide proper financial oversight. Recruiting new board members, executives often think that's their job, and it's not. Boards can sometimes just go ahead and lapse into that as well. But it's really not a good idea, and a mature board is not filled with the friends of the executive. A mature board is filled with the skill sets and the knowledge and the passion and talent and treasure that is needed for the organization. So that's an important piece to be clear about from that relationship between the board and the executive. Certainly, steering committee members are the ambassadors, and how you present yourself in public is really important, because you are representing the organization. It's going to be known, especially in smaller communities. People know you're on that steering committee. So how you choose to present your ambassadorship of that organization is important. And that can also be a great training opportunity for the steering committee members. Certainly making sure that the goals and the metrics that are set, that you have set for the organization, are being measured, and that you're staying apprised of that is very important as well. Supporting in engaging and maintaining your board communication is key. Making sure that you're always staying in communication with one another, and we have so many communication tools these days that it's really, there is no excuse to not be a good communicator among yourselves and on your steering committee, as an executive to the board, or as a board chair to their members. You can't over communicate, and if you have questions, if you have concerns, you should absolutely refuse to be quieted. I had a situation as an executive that I had. Actually, I've come across this in at 2 different times, 2 different organizations where it was really critical and important. I had a board chair ask me to please not let the rest of my board know that I was going to resign. Give them time to do what, I'm not quite sure, but they just kind of freaked out and panicked. And And so in respect to, in respect for her, we set a time so that it wouldn't be that, just sort of never ending kind of thing, just to give her a minute to collect herself. But waiting too long for sharing information is it's malfeasance. It's a malfeasance on the part of the executive and on the part of the board of directors. So it's very important that those pieces of information be delivered, and that the full board, that the transparency be intact. In another situation where an organization, an international organization, wanted to talk about taking over our smaller organization, and I had a board executive committee members say, can we just wait 3 months before we tell the board that this is happening? And, of course not. The answer to that is no. We need to have our brain trust involved in this. We need to have the guidance of these people that we respect, and we have asked to take responsibility for this organization. So people panic, people freak out, and they, in those moments, they ask for things that they themselves, if they were not in a panic, would see. I think usually that that is totally inappropriate. So you can't overshare, and you should refuse to be quieted. That transition time from a working board into a governing board can be super exciting, but it can also be fraught. And so it's important to be kind and gentle. It's kind of like any other transition in your life, really. We are best served if we are kind and aware and considerate in those times, because it's more stressful. Transitioning to a governing board or a higher level functioning board can really benefit the organization through scalability and sustainability. Coalition board members focusing on that long-term strategic planning and oversight provide the growth opportunity for the organization. And it's exciting, and especially I am such a nerd, but I get so jazzed by a board of directors who are looking at our strategic plan and asking, where are we at with this, and where are we at with that, and asking those really good questions, those oversight questions, and setting that direction. It's, for an executive who understands the benefit of a board of directors or a steering committee, it's so exciting to have board members who are engaged like that. So on the flip side of that, I will just say, if you have an executive who is attempting to stall you out, or push you away, or kind of, maybe gloss over pieces, then that would be a good conversation between the board chair and the executive to talk about, what's really going on here. And is there something you need our support with, or is there something that you are afraid to tell us? Transitioning to a governing board certainly sets the stage for a professionalization, say that 5 times fast, of operations. And the growth of a prevention coalition really requires a professional approach to the operations. And when you, as a governing board, focus on your tasks of setting policy, of setting strategy and goals, and of maintaining oversight, then the folks in the trenches are free to do their jobs and really work at their highest potential. Representation is very important. I'm recognizing that I think I've said everything is very important. And I think, frankly, I just really, I have fun with this, but I also take it really seriously for a variety of reasons. But representation is about showing people that are in the throes that they're really the experts, and you respect that. So one of the things I talk about a lot in my work with coalitions in the recovery community is how important it is that the people who have lived experience of substance use or mental health disorders are respected as the experts in the room, because they are. So, when you're working with youth, you should definitely have youth on your board of directors. They should be representing, they shouldn't just be token. And there's different ways of thinking about it. You might have a youth board, or you might have them on the adult board. And my own opinion is that having them on the adult board is going to give everyone more than having them have just a separate board, because you can learn from those young people, and they will learn from you, and you all can grow together. I just think it's an amazing way to be able to function. Also, of course, diversity in terms of cultures and racial and ethnic makeup, and gender identities, and the cultures that you want to be able to impact need to be represented in your leadership. So you're transitioning from a working board into a governing board, and I kind of touched on this already, but your hardworking coalition leaders who launched this effort may not be the governing folks that will be moving forward on the more governing oriented board. And it's really important that they be honored for the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that they did to get this thing going, and rolling up their sleeves, and doing this incredible work to get a prevention coalition off the ground. It deserves lots of respect and praise, and admiration. And so don't forget to honor the work that your working board did on behalf of the organization. So here we are at the assessment of your board. And, here I like these questions because they're not necessarily the questions on the tools that I talked about, Susan, earlier, but these are great questions for a board chair and a board member to be able to have a conversation about. I think it's a great conversation amongst the full board that everyone can talk about. What is the one overarching goal that you want this coalition to reach? And have everyone talk about their one overarching goal. Because if you've got 11 board members and you've got 11 overarching goals in the room, then then you're going to have to work on that a little bit, because we all need to be rowing the boat in the same direction. But that may also mean that you have just come up with your new 4 strategic planning goals, because oftentimes what will happen in a group like that is that you may say it differently, but you can group a lot of those goals together. And you may have somebody on your board whose one overarching goal is completely absent of any connection to the mission of the organization. And that's good information to have as well. How will the board of directors be instrumental in achieving this goal, whatever the goal is? So, I think that my overarching goal for this coalition is to be able to put on to be able to change the environment around the schools so that there's and create a law that says that, you know, um, drug deals that go down within 1,000 feet of a school will have a higher penalty. That's my overarching goal for achieving, for what to achieve. And I think the board of directors can impact that by you know, working together with the law enforcement officials in our community. And I know that, you know, Amy's got a connection with the police chief, and so perhaps she could help get us a meeting with the city council, or you know, those kinds of things, and to be really clear about, you know, what is my goal? How do I think our board of directors can be instrumental in achieving it? And then I personally am a, you know, am a friend of the police commissioner, and I will connect them so that we can create this whole, I mean, you know, those are, that's like off the top of my head, not a great example, but it was, you see what I mean. Being responsible and accountable means stating what you will do and then following through. Oh, shoot. Okay. So the committee, sorry about this slide, everyone. The committee structure is really, it's up to you all, but there are a 501c3 board typically has some standing committees that are basic to the organization. And one of those is the executive committee. So that's made up of the coalition officers. And then you may have a strategy committee, the committee that is going to sort of organize and create the infrastructure around which you can develop a strategic plan as a group. And then also making sure that the functioning and operating of the organization is actually happening in the way that you have set out and have the expectations. You may have a resource development or fundraising committee. In a smaller board, like if you did decide that you wanted your board to just be 7 people, and I have hammered this with my current board multiple times because we have a small board, and they want to have a fundraising committee, and I'm saying, folks, you're all the fundraising committee. There's really no need for us to have a separate committee because we all are responsible for this. But if you have a larger board and you have, it is helpful to be able to have a smaller group who are leading the charge, not, and let me be clear, they're not doing all the fundraising, they're leading the fundraising efforts along with the executive, and if you're, you know, have the luxury of having a development person on staff, then you're supporting that person as well. The program committee, of course, overseeing the development and implementation of the coalition action plan. And that's very important, and that's a responsibility that the steering committee should be involved in and leading. Also, whoop, I can't do that. Advocacy is a very important part of coalition functioning, right? You're advocating all the time. I have to advocate to make sure that the kids get the resources that they need to have their safe and sober, you know, after prom party. I need to advocate for the resources to give the school district the ability to have groups for at-risk kids. I need to advocate for you know, more lighting in the park. I mean, you know, there's all kinds of things, environmental factors, all of those protective factors that we want to be advocating for in our communities are important things. And I think the advocacy committee it could be just an ad hoc committee, but I feel like in a coalition specifically or particularly, it's an important standing committee to have. But the board sets up your committee structure and you develop those charters, and then you have someone assigned to be the chair of that committee, and you can do it in a couple different ways. The board chair can ask individually, would you do this? Or that you can ask in the coalition steering committee meeting who wants to do this. But if you know your board and you're mature and you know the skill sets, the board's more mature. I'm assuming we're all mature. The board's more mature, then it can be a really good idea for the board to say, if this is something you would like to do, please shoot me an email and let me know. And then you can have those conversations and make the selections based on who's going to be able to, who's got the skill sets and who's going to be able to do the job the best. Committee functioning, I believe, I have been a part of and am part of organizations whose committee structure is really driving the organization. And so when all of those committees are functioning and your steering committee, they're all made up of steering committee members. And from time to time, other people come on those committee members, which, by the way, is a great way to vet potential board members. If you bring on volunteers onto a board committee, and then you recognize their strengths and their passion, and so the next thing you do is talk to them about, follow your process, identify that they would be a good person to bring on. So that can be part of the dating process for a new board member. But the committee functioning can really do the work. In a high functioning organization, committees will do the work of the board. And then when you meet, you are able to make good decisions based on the committee work, and not necessarily have to hash through every single decision that needs to be made because that's already been done in committee. The chair of the board is a critical function, and that person, there are some in my personal experience, anyone can be taught, but also can be sort of encouraged and developed into a good board chair. And one of the important pieces of that is the relationship between the chair and the executive, but also the willingness on that person's part to be in charge of and managing and meeting the expectations, but also holding people accountable. So you are role modeling accountability, but you're also willing to make those phone calls and call on your steering committee members to say, so where are you at with this goal? Are we getting anywhere near this? Have we accomplished it? What's our plan? Those kinds of things, because the executive should not be calling board members to say, are you doing your work? Are you keeping your commitments? That's a very awkward and challenging place for an executive to be. So the board chair it's really incumbent upon the board chair. And then if you have a vice chair, then that board chair can also invite that person to help maintain accountability. And I know that we are starting to get low on our time, but the most effective board chairs go beyond expectations and really work on, and I don't think this is beyond expectations, frankly. I think this is the expectation, to really create and set the stage for that culture, that most effective and high functioning culture. I love to have a mission moment in every one of my board meetings. I love to have the ability to say, I invite people from time to time to share the impact of the work that our organization is doing. From time to time, I set up just a staff person to talk about what they do, because oftentimes our board members don't really get what's going on at the grassroots level. So bringing in a staff person out of every department or every functioning area to talk about what it is that they do can be really enlightening and helpful to each of the board members. It's very helpful to encourage your board to go to trainings. Very often, universities will have trainings on leadership, nonprofit board membership. And then obviously one of my big talking points is to have mentorship for new board members for your board. Are there questions? Or any comments, anything anybody wants to share?
I'll tell you, Molly, a lot of things that you hit on are things that we're striving to do. And I'm like sitting there, Amy and I, who's also on this call, we're from the same coalition. And like I say, we are moving forward on things that you definitely excuse me have said. And it's just one of those things as far as like, okay, like that evaluation. I have never seen, I've been with the coalition 5 years, have never seen anything like that. And it's like, it could be a little bit sticky situation. We've got a great strategic plan going, but that whole idea of like, okay, are you checking in? Are you checking in? So as you were talking, I've got like several notes that I'm like going, okay, guess what I'm working on.
That's great. Sorry to give you more work.
No, it's just that it had to be done. I think we're at a turning point of our coalition that was done like we started in 2016, but it's I mean, golly, Ned, the amount of board members I have seen come and go. And I think it's because of like going, well, we just know this person. Let's just bring them on. We just know this person. So I'm texting Amy. I'm like, going, gotta send that list of the questions to the person who's on the nominating
There
committee.
there
They
you
could
go.
be just your friend. Yeah, they may have done work within our county and other areas, but is this what they're up for? So that's
Right.
what I'm looking for to implement.
That's great. That's great. And I can send you, Hannah, I will send Hannah some additional tools and examples and samples of things that
Okay.
share out with you guys when she sends the
And you
power.
guys, you'll send out, Hannah will do the slides as well. Excuse me. And she'll take care of, excellent. Thank you.
Right. That's right, Hannah.
Yeah, whatever you want me to share, I'm happy to.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Also, I do a lot of board trainings with organizational boards. And I love doing that and I'm happy to do it. I am also available to do strategic planning processes with boards for coalitions and organizations. So one of the pieces that, and if it's not me, if it's not me, find someone who can really do some training with your group, because it's that way you're all on the same page, and that can be really, really helpful. Thank you for those comments, Susan. I hope that you all have been able to glean what you were hoping to get from the session today. And I appreciate you all hanging in there with me and being with me today. And I'm so grateful for the work that you are doing as coalition members and leaders. Thank you. Bye, y'all.